everybody to the August finance meeting. Bring this to order. Resolution for approval of tonight's agenda. Moved by Ms. Curran, second by Mr. Smithers. In discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Approval of the minutes for July 25th, moved by Ms. Curran, second by Mr. Perkins. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Approved, no opposition. First up for our resolutions, highway, Mr. Don Chambers, the first resolution. Permanent easements with national parcel, the parcel, in the adjoining property for construction of utilities, county highway facility in the town of Potsdam. Moved by Mr. Lightfoot, second by Mr. Smithers and Mr. Fay. Mr. Chambers.
Yes, thank you. This resolution will authorize the chair to sign easements for basically getting the national grid poles installed on the new highway facility properties. We do have an easement on an adjacent property for the driveway, and the utility lines will be following that new driveway into the parcel where the outpost is being constructed. Likely Spectrum will be placed on the utility poles as well, but they will be leasing that space from National Grid.
Any questions on this resolution for Mr. Chambers? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried.
Thank you.
Our next resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a contract with St. Lawrence Valley Educational Television Council, Inc. for the purpose of maintaining an antenna on the tower of South Colton. Moved by Mr. Perkins, second by Ms. Curran. Mr. Chambers.
Yes, this is an agreement that we've been doing for a number of years. And it provides our two-way communications for the Department of Highways and also many of the town organizations in the county also piggyback on utilizing the antenna for signal broadcast for two-way communication. The 2022 contract, we paid $17,710 for annual contract. And our hope is that this may be our last contract and that we will be on the new towers by the end of this term.
Okay. Any questions, Mr. Chambers? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried.
Thank you.
Next resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a contract with J.J. Keller and Associates, Inc. for an entry-level driver training certification program and modifying the 2022 budget of the Department of Highways. Moved by Mr. Denisha, second by Mr. Smithers and Mr. Sheridan. Mr. Chambers.
Yes, in February of this year, the federal government required that basically any in-house training program has to be certified by the Federal Highway to train your CDL drivers. This would allow even our existing CDL drivers to be trained in-house to go from, say, a CDL B, which is basically a straight job truck, to a Class A, which would be, tractor trailer or a dump trailer dump truck with a tag trailer. The cost is about $900 per month for a 12-month period. However, the certification is good for a 2-year period. So, and every student, there is an additional charge of $50 for each of our in-house people that we train to get a CDL license or a CDL license upgrade. And this company, J.J. Keller, will certify 2 county Department of Highway employees to be certified with the federal government.
Okay, any questions? Mr. Smithers.
Don, will we charge the people for taking the test, particularly people that are applying for employment? And if so, will there be any stipulations on how long, if the hired have to live in order to have that charge reimbursed in the program?
At this point, Mr. Smithers, our intention would be for training an employee once they're employed by the county, not before they're employed. So it would be either somebody that has been a long-term employee that wants to upgrade their license, or somebody that we have hired already off the street with the stipulation that they would move into a position requiring the CDL. So that, and I believe that we already have a county policy which requires, if there's continuing education, that there is a stipulation that they would have to stay either in employment with the county or have some reimbursement back to the county for costs incurred by the department.
Any other questions, Mr. Chambers, concerning this resolution? Ms. Curran?
So we gave ARPA money, we set that aside to train people for CDL. Would it not be more cost effective to send our people there under that money for CDL training versus paying somebody to be able to train in-house? Or my
There's very few openings for the classroom. That may be the case, but usually once somebody goes through the course, they would be in the open market. But that is a point.
Yes, typically those classes are 4 to 6 individuals at Canton Tech. So this gives us ongoing, current day opportunity to train people better. To keep them. Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Okay, Don, give us an update on the projects that you've got going on around the county.
Yes, absolutely. Our paving projects are moving along fine. We have only a few roads yet to recycle. And we are now currently working on overlay, the last course of asphalt to be placed on several of our county roads at this point. As far as bridge projects, we had 4 in-house projects scheduled for our county crews. 2 have been already opened, and the county crews are currently working on 2 bridges. One on County Road 37 in the town of Messina, and the other is on County Road 24 in the town of Pierpont. We do have a culvert project that is being also county funded on County Road 62, which is being done by the J.E. Sheehan Corporation, and that is moving ahead on schedule. As far as the Potsdam Outpost, our contractor is on schedule. The foundations have all been placed for the truck storage, and most of the foundation work has been installed for the salt storage. Stored materials such as the trusses and sheet metal and other goods have been already ordered and are on site, waiting for the contractor to install once the foundation works are completed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chambers. Any questions concerning the projects in your areas? Think none. Okay, we'll move on to solid waste, Mr. Chambers. The first resolution is authorizing the chair to sign contracts for construction of a recycling station transfer facility at the Ogdensburg Transfer Station and modifying the 2022 budget for solid waste. Moved by Ms. Curran, second by Mr. Smithers. Mr. Chambers.
Yes, thank you. I think the board is well aware that at the end of this calendar year, the Development Authority of the North Country will no longer be operating a recycling transfer station for the county any longer. And we will be required to get our recyclables to a market via, compacting and transferring them. So the equipment Development Authority of the North Country has proposed that the St. Lawrence County take ownership of their compactor, their scales, and 2 of their trailers to help facilitate in this transfer. That's what they're currently using to help us with our recycling. However, we're going to need the buildings and the scales, a building for the compactor and a modification to the scale house and grounds to install the new scales and such at the existing transfer station in Lisbon. We have a bidder from Luck Construction. Luck Brothers Incorporated is the general contractor, and the electrical contractor will be Watson Electric. The proposal is to take the 1.6466 million out of the fund balance in solid waste, and the fund balance at the end of 2021, the audited amount, I believe, was just over 3.4 million. So we'd be taking less than half of the solid waste fund balance to finance this project.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Chambers? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried.
Thank you.
The next resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a contract with Department of Judas DPC for bidding, construction, and inspection services for the Augsburg Transfer Station Improvement Project and modifying the 2022 budget for solid waste. Moved by Ms. Curran, second by Mr. Smithers. Mr. Chambers.
Yes, this is a companion resolution with the one that you just approved for the transfer station. Barton LaJudas provided the consulting services for the design. They are the engineer of record, so they will need to provide services throughout the construction of that facility to certify the facility to New York State DEC for us. This again would come out of that fund balance within the solid waste division.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Chambers? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried.
Thank you.
Next resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a contract with Department of Judas DPC for engineering services for Part 360 permit renewal for the Messina Transfer Station, modifying the 2022 budget for solid waste. Moved by Mr. Smithers, second by Mr. Perkins and Ms. Curran. Mr. Chambers.
Yes, the solid waste permit for operating the the Messina Transfer Station is going to run out. And this is a certification that will be good for 5 years. Under the new regulations with New York State DEC, we need to draw plans and also an operation manual, which is quite extensive, showing how we are complying with all the New York State DEC rules. I think the legislature is aware of the rewriting of the Part 360 regs for solid waste. So when a permit comes up for renewal, a new operational plan must be written and showing the DEC how you are going to comply with the new regulations that DEC has in place that regulate solid waste. So this would accomplish this. The plan is to take it out of the operating budget within solid waste in the 2022 calendar year, out of our contingency account. We currently have just over $42,000 in our contingency account, and this would be proposing to take $6,000 out of that to pay for the production of this operational plan.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Chambers? Just a thing to note, the solid waste is an enterprise fund for our taxpayers that are maybe listening in. There's no taxpayer expense. It's all generated by those that are using those transfer stations. All those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried.
Thank you.
Next up is our sheriff, and the resolution is proclaiming September 18th through the 24th of 2022 as Sheriff Week in St. Lawrence County. Moved by Mr. Burt, second by Ms. Curran and Mr. Fay and Ms. Beck. Sheriff.
Good evening, everyone. So this resolution I'm going to bring forward, the State Sheriff's Association and sheriffs of the state are bringing this forward, most of their boards. Our sheriff's offices were established in 1777, obviously, in the Constitution of New York. We actually had a sheriff in our county since 1802. This has been ongoing for centuries. I would really like this to go forward to recognize everybody at the sheriff's office, our 3 divisions, civil, jail, road. They do an exceptional job. The last couple of years, they've had to deal with COVID, many state mandates, short-handed in many of their respects. And they get the job done day in and day out.
Any questions or comments, Sheriff? Job well done, the men and women. Service opinion. All those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Our next resolution is modifying the 2022 budget for the sheriff office for overtime expenses. Moved by Mr. Forsyth, second by Ms. Curran and Mr. Perkins. Sheriff.
So I'm bringing this forward after talking with the county administrator, and planning to go forward. We're hoping that the overages we have will lessen this fall, going into winter. A lot of variables happen throughout the year that's really exhausted our overtime and really pushes us to the limits. I was here last time and time before, talking about our CO issue, so I won't beat it up. We've been very short-handed because of that. A lot of forced overtime. Last 3 or 4 payrolls, it's actually almost $80,000. Last 8 weeks, it's pretty extensive. We're hoping that we're through the difficult parts, but hard to, with our crystal ball to see where we're at. But we come with formulation, and hopefully we have enough in here to get us through the year. But the road patrol is a little different. A lot of our overtime is reimbursed through boat, snowmobile, UTV trails, stone garden grants, DTF. It's a lot of monies from the federal government, and I take a lot of it out of my asset forfeiture. So I think the road probably half are paid through other means of the county tax. So I'm looking for this resolution to have some monies, move some monies and add some monies to our overtime budget.
The other thing I wanted to mention, certainly the sheriffs maintained good communication with the board throughout the first half of this year and even the last part of 2021, based upon a number of variables related to the pandemic, but also staffing. Also want to mention, set aside, you may recall, and we'll see it again, is the 25% of overtime requests are moved over into contingency. For 2022, that total is $90,750. And it's split between corrections and the jail. So in that setup, you have $60,000 set aside for the correction facility and $30,750 set aside. The reason I bring that up is you can also see here where the sheriff's office has demonstrated a pattern of reviewing their existing accounts, seeing where there may be funds associated with part of the problem and moving those first, so that right now we still have $47,000 available in contingency, which we've had to go to several times this year. That remains available should other issues arise here relative to. Just want to point that out in the separation. They're using the budget we've given them, as well as addressing part of the contingency where they need to.
Okay, Mr. Forsyth.
Thank you. How does fuel work into the equation, especially with fuel control? Is that way up first? What's the?
No, I wouldn't say our usage is anywhere up other than the cost is up. I don't control the cost, but our usage is probably the same as we had. Well, it's wrong question. I've seen it on public usage.
Mr. Smithers, I know that you've told us in the past about staff shortages and unable to work out. Could you give us an update on that? Numbers, how many positions are vacant, how many are out right now on that?
Right, we got, and I should tell you this, we're gonna do this week. We have 4 people out on medical, either Mark Corpus Com or 207C jail. Another one pending. We have 3 full-time openings, I believe, and 2 part-times, and we just had another resignation submitted last week. It's gonna be additional, that person's leaving the correctional facility in September. Did send out, since the last time, talked about civil service, we had to send out letters to anybody that was left on the list. We have had no responses from those that were sent out. That just occurred, so now that we have exhausted the list, now we're going to the public. Will be this week, things on our Facebook app. Publicly putting it in the papers that take applications from the public. Requirements we found out through HR were being of 18 years of age and over, either having a high school diploma or a GED equivalent. So, anyway, it's good standing, some background checks, vet these people, but now I'm actually going to the public or higher up, back to better term, the streets, fill this position. We are in dire straits at this correctional facility. So we'll be blasting the campaign out this week to public out there. Hopefully get several applications. This is
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is directed at both the sheriff and Mrs. Doyle. This is very reminiscent of public health and them trying to recruit. And I know you've come up with some ways to advertise that are creative and gotten a lot of backup from HR. Is there a possibility we can kind of combine forces here, so to speak, and this is directly from the sheriff's, like all the department heads advertise on the road. And you know what I'm talking about?
I do.
Yeah, maybe we could do that. It'd be great. Because, you know, not only the cost, but it's a safety issue. Yeah. Let's see else. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Burke.
Sure. Do the correction officers go through the same training?
No, their academy is shorter. Their FTO period, field training observation is shorter. It's usually 4 to 6 weeks. Where some on the road would be maybe 3 months, 2 to 3 months. It's just the nature of the job. So even if we hire people, they're going to be in an FTO stage, or we can. I could say right now that just talked about overtime in the jail. Last week we had 17 inmates that were positive for COVID, 5 COs. There was 5 COs that couldn't work last week. Just it's taxing. It's COVID and it's transmissible. Get in that state where jail is can't spread out, or you can't distance yourself at times. These things we've had, this is probably the 3rd wave of COVID this year in our correctional facility. You could take examples of, like, right now, we had an inmate that was sent to Camp Hospital Hospital today. They're going to be there for a minimum of 4 days. Every time you have someone in the hospital, because of what per contract, or patrol officer and CO with them, that's all overtime, because it doesn't count for your minimum staffing correctional facility. Send one to the hospital, it's overtime. That's just contractual. Just so many things, variables that I would love to control, but I can't. Just go forward. That's
Could I ask you one more question on the training? Is that done just once a year?
correct. We have usually we hold our correctional academy in the summer up at Kent College. Work with cooperation, just so our employees, we have in Franklin County, Jefferson County, other distant counties may send in CO. We have college students that can get into that program, get their academy before they even get hired. Not allowed to do that, which they would, or gravitate towards the road patrol, law enforcement. But that's usually once a year in the summer.
Thank you, Sheriff.
So the starting salary, we're asking the sheriff for the starting salary for anybody out there in public listening, it's about 45,000.
Full benefits, it's provisional, obviously through HR, we have to do a test, it's not gonna be until probably next year. great occupation. And our COs, our staff, our management, they do a very good job with it. As I said last time, I'm bragging up, but the commission uses our jail as one of those examples for anybody else state to, when they start a facility, they have them come and visit our facility. So we run it the right way. So it's something we're proud of. See, that's workers. Administration, very good job with it. So you're identified by state commission, go to St. Lawrence County and look at their jail, kind of eat what they do. That's pretty good kudos to our staff. Proud of it.
Does the jail require male and female corrections officers, or can they serve in each area?
We do both, but we have both pretty equal right now, actually. Almost well, the same. Quite a few females, do an excellent job because we have the transports of females or certain areas of CO. That's
We have the question. So we have the resolution in front of us. All those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Thank you. Thank you. Next up, community services, Jay Ulrich, and the resolution is modifying the 2022 budget for the opioid treatment program for community services by Mr. Burke, second by Ms. Curran. Jay Ulrich.
Yep, thank you. So this resolution is asking to increase our medical supply line for medication for the OTP. We had originally scheduled $7,500 in the COSUP grant. We allocated that to cover the cost of medication. Our projections at that time were about 30 patients at the end of the first quarter. We have 41 at the end of the first month. And currently we have 46. So because of the volume of individuals that we're serving, we're asking to increase the allocation for the purchase of medication out of the local revenue budget. Now, there is going to be some leftover COSUP monies because of salary lag for the fiscal manager, and also one of the subawardees will not be allocating their full amount of the funding. So we anticipate approximately $50,000, and we'll know better towards the end of the grant period, that we could move that money back into our revenue line to offset these costs. But for now, this is kind of a stopgap to make sure that we do not run out of medications for the OTP.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Ulrich concerning this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you. Yep, thank you.
Next up is our vacancy review committee, starring our county administrator.
Good evening. So a little bit more detail for you this evening. Dylan's going to be handing out. Kevin is quick to remind me that it's always more helpful when you have even the rough data in front of you as I talk through different phases of it. And if you have questions, we can certainly go over those. So annually, I've been making a habit of bringing you updated information, making recommendations, and last year started bringing you some demographic information to help you understand the compilation of our workforce. So we've continued to expand on that, recognizing that there have been some staffing challenges and how that affects us. So I give you the history, which you all see every month in our vacancy resolution. Actions were taken in 2015 to bring back that vacancy review committee after a few years away from it. And since that time, we've changed it up a little bit to rotate the legislators. It used to be an assignment of legislators and they would report back. I think we found it, and as I've heard from many legislators, very helpful to have a rotation of legislators so that everyone has an opportunity to sit in with, it will be whoever is presenting that month, but an opportunity to talk to department heads. Often we have many other types of conversations about staffing, about programs, and different challenges that face departments. So that's been successful. What I bring to you tonight is an update on that, an analysis of that, and then more recommendations that I've brought before you in the past. So we start out with our summary. I try to give you the breakdown between males and females. We are eerily similar, one position different than we were from 2021. And we are only 5 positions different, or 4 positions different, I'm sorry, from the female ratio to the male ratio of last year. We still stay at about 59% female and 40 to 41% male, making up our workforce. So the retirement tiers, we actually shifted this year. For the first time, we've moved from a tier 4 heavy retirement workforce to now a tier 6. We were 397 last year in tier 4. Now we top out at 389, being the heaviest tier of employees that we have in the New York State retirement system. So if you flip over to the second page, again, I break down just for information purposes where we sit with the age range of our employees, from 20 all the way up to 70 plus. But for this year, as well as last, that 50 to 54 age group is our biggest age group. Last year, it was 145. This year, it's 133. You can see down through how we're shifting a little bit in our age range as our employee workforce. Years of service, similarly, again, just for information purposes, like to provide you with information. We've continued to improve the way that we represent. So you'll see a note there on years of service. We had in last year's included the JTPA, which are the workforce folks, as well as the voting system technicians. In that larger number, we pulled those out so you actually see the year-round workforce. So you've got the totals there in front of you as well for years of service, which we recognize at the department level all the way up through to the 30 years, and then they come before you annually in November once they've exceeded that 30 year. Often many have left us and retired, but if they haven't, they'll either come back and join us or we're able to honor their service with us. And then we break down the representation status as well. We all know CSEA is our largest union in the county, but we also provide you the totals along with all 6 other unions, as well as the total of unrepresented. And that, again, the shift from last year, we're now including board members and the part-time correctional officers in those overall totals. So we're trying to refine it as we continue to provide this information. And I'm really interested, just as sort of that snapshot in time for you to understand the workforce, to just give you that prior year and the current year. I don't know that there's great interest in going out 4 or 5 years in the totals. You just can see a snapshot in time of what makes up the workforce in the county. So when you flip over, this is some new information this year for you, provided by Human Resources in the civil service exam. So we spent some time talking about how difficult it is to get folks in for exams. We've talked about waiving exam fees so that folks might be more attracted to come in and take exams. But this is a breakdown for you of the exams that were held, how many people. So you're starting to see that number climb once again, back up to numbers nearing, not yet there, but nearing the 2018 numbers of participants. A little bit of the revenue capture, and then just some dates in terms of how those exams have worked out when we've held those. The next one, apologize, it doesn't look like the grid transfer here, but the onboarding from applications to new hires, and then a capture for HR of how many orientations are held. We tried throughout COVID, as we brought people on, to have smaller groups, but also to have more frequent orientations so that people can get to work more quickly rather than waiting for that orientation date to come. And then we capture, which is more about what we talk about in vacancy, are the days vacant. And this gives you a look back to 17 on the average days. And we talk about many times it's more than that month, and this shows it's about 6 weeks before we see that position that was vacated be filled once again. And in 2021, my recommendations, and the board was supportive of having both the temporary position opportunity continued after COVID, as well as look at some key positions and bring in temporary positions to eventually take the place of those higher level positions that may require that overlap for a period of time. Any questions on the data so far?
Mr. Burke.
Graph that shows top of the second page, where the 50 to 54
Guess I'm wondering, you also, somebody also had number of these people. I guess I'm wondering about.
We do have that information. I can get that number for you.
And I'm guessing. Certainly.
Depending on when they join us, sure. Yep, we can get you that information as well.
The average days, they. The last one.
Yep.
Average days. That, guess I'm wondering, by design. In the earlier years, that was considered a badge of honor. Later years, that we look more at the critical services. Strictly as constant, so I guess I'm just wondering, as we look at those numbers, we don't know the street. And again, that certainly, those earlier years, having positions taken.
I'm going to speak to that a little bit further on presentation. So, no, absolutely. And it is, and it's interesting in the analysis of previous years, lower the position in immediate fills was better, right? That's to the point you're talking about. So when you saw those 30 to 60 and certainly the 90, those percentages were higher. That was better at the time. We've now changed. Some of my recommendations take that into account. So the next page, last page, before we get into the analysis and the recommendations, is just a picture of the turnover by month. I think you'll note a few of the different months that are a little bit higher than others, as well as turnover by department. And that goes back just through the 2018 to 2021 timeframe. So I leave that with you to draw your own conclusions as far as the numbers, but just so that you get a little bit better picture when you hear from different departments and the challenges that they face, you can see where some of these numbers might impact those specific struggles. Okay, so if after looking at these two charts, you have questions, let me know. We're happy to do a deeper dive if you have specific questions about specific years.
Mrs. Sager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did have a question about turnover by department. Of course, a lot of these departments have many fewer people in them. So is there a way to look at it by percentage? Social services obviously has a lot more people, and that's why that number pops out, right?
Yes.
So,
Of so many, so like 24.
yes,
Sure,
yes,
we can add that to it. Happy to.
thank you.
Okay. So on the last page, you'll see the chart that I typically provide to you, and I'll walk you through it as well as to Legislator Burke's point, try to illustrate for you the juxtaposition of where we're going. So in the annual analysis, the total, and I've given this to you for a number of years now, we end up typically between 155 and 165. This year is no different at 162. However, during the COVID years, we saw numbers as low as 135. So we're still within the range, but we're seeing over last year an 18% increase in the number of positions that were requested to be filled. And it is actually in line with the change over the 4-year average as well. So over the average, we're 7 positions higher than we have been for the last few years. So then when we look at the breakdown, part of what the board said was at the beginning, you're going to hold these positions for 90 days. The chair is going to be completely empty before you put someone in it. We're going to appreciate those savings in the meantime. We also know that you've heard from many departments, the civil service process, as the sheriff just mentioned, once you have to canvass, then you interview, you may or may not get anyone, then you can start the process all over. And you elongate the filling. And for us, for many years, they overlapped. So while you ran the process and the position was vacant, the work wasn't getting done, and you were trying to find a quality candidate to fill the spot. So what we've seen over the last couple of years is an increase in that immediate fill. And in fact, we went up last year to the 72nd percentile. This year, we're up to 92% of immediate fill for positions in the county. That's a 20% increase over the prior year and a 5% increase over the average of the 4 years. So I think that starts to demonstrate much of what many of you have said, which is you need to get these positions filled, and in some cases overlap the position of the person leaving. The 30 days has dropped by almost 11% to 2.47%. 60 days is down to 1%. That's actually a slight increase. We try to make sure that if departments are seeing positions vacant for that long a period of time, that we add that date to it so they get credit for having that position vacant for 30 or 60 days, or in some cases 90. A modest decrease in the 90 days, 0.62, just about 2% below what you saw last year. The held or withdrawn positions was 3%, none in the denied, and the held and withdrawn was about a 6.91% reduction in the year prior. So you look at the changeover average, that just gives you some more information. And to exactly Mr. Burke's point, the best performance year in 2016-17 was 30%. The lower, the better, right? Now we're up at 92. So you can see a change in the posture of filling positions and the board's approval rating of positions coming through vacancy and then coming through the board. You then see all the way down through those numbers, and I always compare them to our newer percentages, but none of them have the numbers related to the change in immediate fills. In 2021 to 22, there were 24 positions that came through as abolish and create. For many years, that was also the only way you got a new position was if you gave one up. And we saw that number drop for a few years. This is an increase of 11 over the last measuring period, which was 20 to 21, or 15% of those considered. And then we always captured the number, tried to do only salary, not benefits, was 2.2 million for the 2021 to 2022 vacancy period. Now, this is only salary, and it's a pretty significant increase from the prior year of to 609,000. Questions before I go on to the recommendations? So I think the data, the analysis prescribes what the board's actions have demonstrated, and that is there's a much greater interest in seeing these positions filled immediately. The vacancy review committee is asking great questions. Department heads are coming in even more well prepared each year as they become more familiar with what the needs are and how they've shifted throughout the pandemic. So the recommendations that I've come up with and bring to you as information tonight, certainly interested in bringing these forward. What would occur and what we've done in the past years? If there's no objection to my recommendations, we'll capture them in a resolution and I'll bring that to you at the September board meeting, which you can amend or strike or change to the will of the board. So my recommendations are as follows. In 2008, a resolution was passed called authorizing St. Lawrence County to implement a non-essential services hiring freeze. And as the data I just presented you with demonstrates, we're no longer in a hiring freeze. So I would ask for consideration that the resolution for 2008 be rescinded going forward. The second recommendation is to amend a practice that was adopted in 2012. Resolution was adopted titled Accepting the Recommendations of the Management Compensation Committee for Non-Union Graded and Management Employees regarding rescinding portions of resolution in 2005 related to the salary plan for St. Lawrence County non-union graded management employees and adopting a non-union salary schedule. That was an awful. So at the end, the very last be it further resolved says, be it further resolved that any future salary increases will be applied to the schedule on an alternating percentage and lump sum basis. I was a part of the Management Compensation Committee at the time as a staff member, so I can explain to you the intent. At the time, there was an interest in condensing the management salary scale so that there was less difference between band 1 and band 8. Well, I can tell you that's been accomplished because the way that this works, each year, management confidential positions follow the CSEA schedule. And in 2012, it changed to being a total of those salaries divided by the number of people in them. And that gave you a dollar amount. So you started out with a percentage. So you ended up spending the same amount of money. And the reality became, with all the titles on that scale, there's a median. Everyone below the median got a dollar amount disproportionately higher by the split, and everyone above the median got a lesser amount because of the division. So you did accomplish the sandwich of the management salary scale. But what we're saying now is that doesn't make sense anymore. And we're asking, not for any other change, no dollar difference. Just go back to allowing the percentage to be applied rather than a lump sum. Questions on that before I go on?
Mr. Forsythe.
So if I'm a member of the negotiating team union contract, aren't you getting both ways? Once you're negotiating with the unions for a 3-year contract, whatever, but you reciprocate and get that back to the management way.
Either way, right now, management, because of resolution passed in 2005, I believe, management follows CSEA. So the legislators make the determination on the percentage as far as the negotiating, but yes, that issue's been raised.
So what I remember in one of the negotiating, I think I must have been the chairman at the time, was by going with this average of the 25 or 30 people in that thing versus the percentage basis, anyone making $90,000 and above was actually being unfairly treated. So what was happening was senior employees under the supervision of those department heads were actually almost at or sometimes even above what their supervisor was. Right.
That's correct. And so over the years, you've seen resolutions, the body has seen resolutions that makes adjustments sometime when there are folks who are supervised by people making more than them. We currently have 6 of those scenarios in the county, and we are well aware of why those are in place. Sometimes because of raises, those things happen, but the ones that are in place now are because of experience. So those are on purpose, because we try to recognize that as well. But in that scenario you described, that's been raised as an issue before, and that's why the legislators make the determination. Because the legislative salaries are fixed. They're not impacted by the CSEA. Okay, moving on to the next recommendation that I'll be making this evening is to commission a compensation study. Many of my colleagues, and I've spoken to you about this previously, the last compensation study done in St. Lawrence County was in 2000. And we are now at a point where both looking at what the market will bear, as well as what like titles are providing for salaries, is a place many other counties around the state are going, if they are not just addressing it by flat percentage raises. So some counties are saying we're going to add a 4% raise to all salaries in the county, be done with it. Others are commissioning, and Portland County is one that we have looked at, a compensation study. I would recommend that we do one for management compensation, for management confidential, CSEA, and then pull in the titles of the other 6 units. That would provide all titles with at least an assessment. Now, in these scenarios, not everyone's a winner, depending on what the market will yield, but it's an objective look by an outside entity at how this works and what the recommendations are. The board can then receive the compensation study and either take action on it or utilize it for a future negotiation opportunity, which we will have, I believe, 3 union contracts coming up in 24 and then 4 other contracts coming up in 26.
Mr. Lightfoot.
Where are you going to be looking for comparable positions, employees and whatnot? Is this going to be a statewide look at it, or are you going to pick and choose the counties that you will use as a comparison?
Well, 2 things. My recommendation would be to provide me with the opportunity to do an RFP process. So we would have an outside entity do it. And those that I'm familiar with look statewide. But I could find out if they take region into account, market into account. Certainly counties on Long Island don't compare to St. Lawrence County.
Okay, so how are you going to compile all this information, salaries and whatnot, and come up with a recommendation to this board as to what you think we should be doing, or at least what we should consider doing?
So we would be asking a consultant to do that responded to the RFP, and we would let them do it independently, bring back a recommendation that would be provided to you.
So then, would there be certain ramifications that they have to work within? In other words, the same titles, essentially, anyway, comparison of what they are? And how do you differentiate the metropolitan areas from the 6 here in St. Lawrence County, so to speak, where cost of living supposedly in those areas to the south of us is considerably more expensive than it is to live up here, although you'd never know it.
We can prescribe the RFP to what you'd like to see here. But I think giving them the opportunity, they're the experts in the field. Many of my colleagues are having them finish, so I can share the ones that I have with you, with the board, to take a look at, and you can make a determination if that meets the needs that we need to have looked at. I think 22 years is a long time not to have an objective look at where our titles come in, and where they may be fine, and that may be the assessment that they make. They may just be off a bit in certain areas, and they may be woefully behind. We don't know that. And I wouldn't make that assessment. I would take into consideration their review and their recommendations.
Well, I think we'll have to give it some thought.
And that's
Yeah,
that's why it's a recommendation.
Yep, thank you.
Any other questions before I move on?
Support that.
And just another thing to consider is on the side, 5 weeks off or 4 weeks off, we have to weigh that in too.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So the next item would be the potential to negotiate with regards to the vacation buyback provision in the contract. You may recall during COVID, when it was very difficult for folks to get time off, the board authorized and the unions agreed to provide an opportunity for vacation buyback to be taken without taking the 5 days off as we currently require. In that case, we made some ceiling thresholds. We said you'd at least have to have 300 hours. Then I think in the second iteration, we said more than 200 hours in your bank to be able to access this benefit. And in the scenario that I described, you see it written here, you have to take your normal week, whether it's 35 or 40 hours. So you couldn't take 5 hours of vacation buyback and drive payroll crazy. What you do is take a week's time, 35 or 40 hours, and you'd have to have a floor. So rather than have to achieve a ceiling, you'd at least have to have 100 hours in your bank in order to access this benefit. And you could do it more than one time per year. So this would give access to our employees to time that's already on the books for them. And it would also provide them with an opportunity to access that when they need it. So this is a benefit that we pay out upon departure. People retire or leave or resign. They get this time anyway. This time is given to them. This is a negotiated benefit. This would just give them an increase in access to it if we were able to, and the board was supportive of moving this direction. Next item, next 2 items, actually, the last 2 items I have are to amend 2 recommendations that I made in 2021. So the board was supportive of 2 things: the temporary positions continuing that were authorized under COVID, and the authorization to bring folks in ahead of some folks retiring or resigning when necessary. So what we've learned during this time is it's very difficult because in these scenarios, benefits and accruals are not a part of the temporary setup. So in management in unrepresented situations, I'm recommending to you that we allow part-time positions, these temporary positions, to have access to those accruals on a prorated basis. In addition, on the replacement position that will come in and eventually succeed in the succession planning idea, the person coming in, allow them to also begin to have benefits and begin to retain accruals so that they'd be more attractive for them to take the position. What we found is as we're trying to fill these temporary positions, they're temporary, they're full-time, but they don't offer any of these benefits, so folks aren't as interested in taking. This gives us just another area where we can have folks interested to join us, as well as coming in to replace a full-time, long-term position, hopefully, bringing them in early, much like we just did with our superintendent of buildings and grounds, gives them an opportunity for the benefits they'll have once that person retires, but they're also getting that training ahead of time as well.
So what does that say to our part-time correctional officers who do not have access to benefits?
So they are permanent part-time, these are temporary positions.
So in temporary meeting, what length of time?
So it depends, minimum of 3 months, a maximum of 6 months. Other questions?
Bert,
I like your last two resolutions. Take this part that we're missing, the amount of money. You have to have supervised and new employees. Very cost them strong. The other comment is on the education of the lump sum. Not sure, are you advocating that we just have percentage? The argument and age old argument is that we do percentage that over the that the continues standard gap lowest and highest. Perfect. And then again, the I know that this is the way but I always thought that in some cases, these certainly help keep the distances between the lowest paid and the highest paid.
John, your analysis is correct. But at some point in time, it seemed to be, I was chairman back in 17, 18, there were people who were supervising, people who were actually making more money.
That's not.
It was because of that policy, I think. So I think what the board did, what was it, back in 12? They implemented what you said, which was lump sum, and then they alternated it. Then it got to be a problem. So then people were supervising people. They were,
Maybe instead of. Some. And the other thing to say. Should be able to tell us what are salient points for administration. What is it? Say,
I don't know. There's a policy that exists within departments that they're actually doing that formally, or they're just, I would expect that informally they were doing that.
There, I think there's not been an indicator, certainly that they put forward that the board approved, as far as that goes.
Mrs. Haggard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Going back to compensation. Stuff. Which I'm all over. But Mr. Lightfoot obviously had a good point. Do these consultants consider, for example, Mr. Chambers has lost people to villages and towns because of pay issues. So it would have to go beyond just county employee that they take a look at. They must look at comparable jobs in a region. Do you know that?
I don't, but I believe that they look at both what the market can bear as well as what like titles. I think that's to the point.
Okay, yeah, because, in a vacuum, you're right, Nassau County is, it's the same thing with teachers. They make
That's right.
well over $100,000 Ireland or more. Okay, so it would be a general marketing. Thank you.
Do remember when we actually discussed compensation for our county attorney, take over of the SS legal, compare that to similar counties and duties. We actually did that with our county administrator's salary. We looked at the size of the county. It's 108, 110,000, and what their actual responsibilities were too. So we kind of regionalized it, but not for smaller counties or similar sized counties that are a little bit. So, I would expect that if we agree to do this request for a proposal, that data be assimilated in that fashion, similar sized counties. We wouldn't want to compare ourselves to the CSEA position or administrative position in Westchester County. Without the data.
Mr. Chair.
Certainly.
At both of those times, we also, not so much. We look at private sector and the market. So there's a lot of moving parts to this, which I'm sure these consultants bringing in. We don't want to lose people to the private sector. Maybe. Thank you.
Other questions related to either the data or the recommendations presented?
So I have one which stimulated this,
Sorry.
which stimulated this whole data process.
So I do this every year. And I think looking at some of the changes that make a lot of sense with both what I understand to be not only the great resignation, but now the public great reshuffle, that folks are moving back in and around the workforce and trying to make sure that not only our existing employees stay, but that we're able to recruit and retain talent in the future. These are some ideas that I have that I'd like to at least bring to you to either say, no, thank you, bring the other ones. These are approved, move forward. I think that's my role.
Mrs. Egger?
And to that point, I want to commend Mrs. Doyle. I think this is an excellent report. Really encapsulated a lot of information. Thank you for your hard work. Appreciate
Move on now, we have 3 departments with us this evening to present vacancies to you. The first one is for buildings and grounds. And I believe that Jim Traffin is with us, our new superintendent. Online, Bill? I can speak to these. With the change in superintendent leadership in the department, this is an area that falls under the county administrator's budget. These positions likewise have been vacant, as you've seen in the vacancy authorization forms in March, April, and June. So throughout the course of the first half of this year, there have been retirements and departures. I believe one was an internal transfer over to our correctional facility, and then 2 were retirements. So we'd like to see these filled. We've certainly seen a shift in programs and projects within the buildings and grounds department with our change in leadership. So our hope is that these will be filled so they can get back up to full staff and really tackle some of the areas that need a lot of attention in our county facilities. Questions? Okay. The next is real property. We have, I believe, Bruce Green with us this evening to present his request for a new position.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much. Good evening, folks. I'm here to ask tonight for the coordinator of real property tax services 3 position. It's an additional position in our office. We have just received word that our current coordinator will be retiring in January. And this will allow a new person to get training for that position next, say, 4 months or so. So it's a new position, be a provisional appointment, so the person would then have to take test, score within the top 3 of test the civil service test. I would also like to ask if you were so willing, is if this position could also, if I could go forth and advertise prior to next month. This is a key position in our office. Donna Brown is the current employee coordinator, state coordinator. Since she'll be retiring, she's got abundance of knowledge, experience, information she needs to part on. So far, I've been that person trying to get caught up to speed as school tax bills are stuff. So it's important that I can train for.
So the next meeting, Mr. Smith, go ahead.
It's interesting, the last sentence in your justification. This position will be abolished and retirement. Current coordinator of field services. So is this then along the ideas, we need somebody like training for this need?
That's right. This position would be a training position and then would remain the current coordinator position in evaluation next year.
So like,
I think it's a great idea. You take somebody that just because they successfully passed a civil service exam doesn't walk in the door on day one and have a wealth of knowledge about how things are handled. And I think it's a great idea, and I applaud you for bringing it forward. Thank you.
so ask the question of whether we allow Mr. Green to actually start advertising for this position. Our next full board meeting is September 12th, which is 2 weeks away. So all those in favor of allowing Mr. Green to start the process, just put your hand up there, Alex.
Any other questions?
Great, thank you very much.
The last position to be considered this evening is Washington County Attorney.
Good evening. Thank you. The position that I'm seeking to fill at this point is an assistant county attorney position. The prior occupant of the position ultimately had to leave after a year of service. Usually his mother passed away, his brother passed away all in the span of 4 months. He came within 2 months. So he had part from location. The person that would fill this position would be operating within the DSS unit dedicated towards Article 10. Article 10 are neglect and abuse matters. We currently have 2 dedicated to that. This would be the 3rd dedicated to that. We have 1 dedicated to child support matters, and then we have 3 utility players that are operating in every field almost on a daily basis. So this is a rather key position, if you recall. When my office came into being involved with the Department of Social Services legal unit back in May of 2021, we did a hand count at that time of the files, the number of children that were in care. The number of children that were in care at that time was about 370. That was the hand count that was formed at that time. I'm being advised as of today that due to a lot of work performed by these article attorneys, that we may close out the month of August at around 257, which is about 120 fewer than we were at about 15 months ago. So significant work that's being performed here, and that has a ripple effect on all of the units really of the Department of Social Services. Child is in care, they're receiving a number of different services provided by us. They are caring. They are costing a significant amount, but it's also a difficult lifestyle for them, and so these people really carry on yeoman service for the county and for that department. So, with your permission, I'd like to.
Questions? Second.
Mr. Button, has the court has kind of picked up speed on some of these things. That's correct.
On some, yes.
Yeah, over COVID.
Yep. Oh, yes.
Yeah, because I do have some constituents who required, I was hoping had gotten back
Oh, yes, almost
semi-normal.
all of our proceedings at this point are in person. We do still have certain activities under Article 10, specifically Family Court Act 1034 report, that are still remote. But our child support matters, for the most part, are in person. All of our 10 matters, with the exception of those 1034s, are in person. And that's a difficult thing when you have 4 different family court judges operating at the same time. We need to have enough attorneys that bounce into those areas and be available. Oftentimes we'll have 3 different judges handling 3 different Article 10 matters simultaneously with child support matters, potentially a hearing officer handling 4, which would require 5 different attorneys operating at the same time in those 4.
Thank you.
Any other questions for this position? Okay, next up is the American Rescue Plan Act, commission update, this is every finance. This is Doyle.
So tonight, we're going to spend some time very shortly with Soil and Water Conservation District staff. But I did want to just let you know we've made significant progress to that end. We have 2 resolutions included tonight for consideration. We also, and that's on the ash tree removal public safety project. We've also made progress on the Clifton Pine Hospital. We're working with those folks to get the contract arrangements in place. We'll be bringing that through for your approval very shortly. At the August board meeting, many of you shared your delight at reviewing the areas that have been improved by the ARPA funds at the Governor and St. Lawrence County Fair this year. We are just awaiting kind of closeout for that project and to receive their last invoice. They seemed very pleased with the work they were able to complete because of it. I met last week with Clarkson with regards to the EMT project or availability scholarship process the county is putting forward. We do have 1 candidate. We're working very hard to get into the EMTB or the, I believe it's BLS class that's going to be off-site at Parrishville, scheduled to start tomorrow. So we're working together to figure out all the ancillary costs like book and the clothing that's required for the course, but as well as a seamless process for application of a scholarship type. Emergency Services has prepared for all 3 programs. They've estimated costs attached to what they believe between paramedic, the EMT, and some of the marketing they'd like to do around getting folks into this program. So we're working through some of those. You'll see that next month. But our hope is we'll have someone in that class this term. The child care program that many of you have seen promoted as a great partnership between SUNY Canton, the Small Business Center, the Press Center, the IDA. They have 12 committed. And they're really excited about that. Their goal was 12 to 15, and that deadline is tomorrow. So we're really seeing some of these funds and programs starting to move forward. Happy to report to you that they're getting used and being put out there. So, but to that end, our first resolution tonight under American Rescue Plans is for the ash tree removal project. I think you could go ahead and do that.
Okay. So the resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a contract appropriating American Rescue Plan Act funds for the purpose of removal of ash trees with Soil and Water Conservation District, modifying the 2022 budget for the county administrator's office. Moved by Mr. Burke, second by Mr. Smithers and Mr. Lightfoot.
As was introduced, this resolution is to move forward with the removal of ash trees on county highway, within county highway bounds using ARPA funds to mitigate any potential safety hazards to the public with the trees falling into the ash line. So this resolution is to start the process of allowing us to work on that project. We have dedicated $900,000 for this project. We are going to be working with the highway department to identify where the highway bounds are along the roads, which trees. And we are proposing to work through the towns of the county as EAP had spread, so starting in Keenan, where it was first located, moving along the river, and then in as the had spread. Recognizing that homeowners in our county often use firewood as a heating source, if they have trees that are being removed from their property in the right of way that could be utilized for firewood. We would be able to set up a MOU, a memorandum of understanding with that landowner and have the wood placed by the whoever the contractor. Place it on their property, out of the right of way, at whatever lengths they got. They're going to process the firewood, but it can be left there for. Again, as long as it's of some quality, if it's not determined to have any firewood quality, we wouldn't. We would also, as part of this project, do a planting of trees, native trees on a county parcel to offset some. We wouldn't place them back in the highway bounds. Place to place them. So we'll move them to a county parcel that is in need of a little bit of help generating. No, I think that was it.
So this is-
Questions? It's pretty thorough. This is accurate.
Thank you for your report. I think somebody asked this before, I don't remember. But, when you cut them down, if they're infected with the emerald ash beetle, are they? Can still be used for firewood?
Depending on what's. If they're too far gone. What actually. Kind of generally speaking, if you get. But then fire.
So it doesn't exacerbate the spread of beetles.
It wouldn't, so leaving it on site would be the best option. But the UC is. Quarantine. Limiting factor is. That's what.
Anyone else concerning this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Okay, so we have discussion for state of the forest.
So with county reforestation lands now under a management system, main focus has been for the lands has been these inventories and plans are now 13 out of date, no longer stock. Of course. So the inventorying of county parks has been underway since last year. Then once completed, the management plan written describe current forest conditions, outline of factors. For the collected data, stands specific descriptions and descriptions along with the 20-year activities created parcel. Information for each parcel will then be used to create a master activity schedule for all county tracks, all based on 100-year. So as part of the management plan update, carbon credits are being explored as an additional form of revenue component towards management. Carbon sequestration, the process of carbon dioxide is consumed by plants. Carbon from soils. Forests can act as carbon sinks by storing carbon offsets emissions to the atmosphere. Forest management increases the ability of carbon through thinning, harvesting to regenerate new growth and improve soil quality.
With efforts to reduce carbon dioxide emissions and limit the effects of climate change and interest, carbon sequestration, of course, of economic value of commodity. Voluntary carbon markets have formed as individuals and entities seek to use, carbon offsets, credits, use of greenhouse gas emissions. These carbon markets turn emissions reductions and removals of tradable assets and opportunities for generated carbon credits through a forward carbon credit collector. The carbon credit collecting company assesses standing carbon content, presents this assessed value on carbon markets, sells it on highest bidder on behalf. In conjunction with timber sales, county properties could benefit from selling carbon credits as an additional form of revenue. Typically, multiple harvests take place over the course of a same location, only provide revenue on the year of harvest. Carbon credits could be sold to aggregators during these non-harvest years or periods, and this would generate income on parcels that otherwise not produce revenue. It would also increase parcels' overall net value by generating income over the entire rotational age, not just on your.
So we're going to look into seeing selling carbon credits on parcels. Any potential for, as Aaron said, income generation on these parcels.
Okay, Mr. Forrest, that this question.
Sorry, revenue. Is that what we're gonna look into and see what type it'll generate?
So because of potential of $50 a carbon credit, but we have to see if it can be within county contracting constraints. What these markets are looking at, fit what we are able to.
Mr. Reagan.
How many trees do we plant each year?
You mean for the county or on county parcels?
On the county forests? Have we considered doing plantings?
Possibly. So once all the inventories are out there, that may be an option. For most cases, we do have enough regeneration. Then generally speaking, we wouldn't need to unless sector.
But we'll be doing with the ARPA funds on county parcels. So we have identified through this inventory and updating process is in need of some planting help. Natural conditions not working as well there, and therefore that'll be our first planting on the parcel in a number of years.
What species? Wait,
So that's the only parcel we have that needs planting?
There are definitely probably others. It's just a matter of.
I'm just a little confused. If we have parcels that do need planting, and we don't, year after year, don't do any plantings, it would seem that, we never will build a healthy forest on some of these parcels.
And hopefully we'll be able to start. We haven't ever had funding to do plantings and the biddings associated with planting. So you need to make sure that the area is prepped before the plant goes in. We haven't had a budget to do that. So we're hoping that now that we have the first project, there's funding, we have an inventory, we'll have a plan, we'll have a framework established to start doing this, and we have a better person.
So if, what you're saying, if I'm understanding what's gone on is, for many, many years, the county has used its, county forest as a revenue source. But we haven't, invested any money back into those forests to rebuild them and keep them healthy. Is that what I mean, you guys, it's not you guys that did it, it's us, so.
Well, in 2018, the board, I believe it was 2018, the board of legislators did take a first jump by saying, we understand we need to stop doing the revenue. And that was the first step, and that definitely has helped. But yes, now it is time to take a look and say, okay, now that we've stopped cutting, what can we do to make these parcels even better? And that's what we're doing.
So I would hope that, part of the recommendations is when we do resume cutting, whenever that might happen, that some of the revenues, go into, planting. So that, you know, we're not just, plundering our, forests, which, you know, is what I believe we did for many years before you guys, you know, were handed with over the forests.
And we are, and this is one reason why we're looking at if we can, carbon credits is something that the board would consider selling, we can make it work with a framework. We'd be generating some revenue and reinvesting that.
I commend you guys for your efforts.
Mr. Forsythe.
A couple things, in some of the places I went in New Brunswick especially, they'll clear cut and they'll leave one tree. And that's the seed tree and everything grows around it. So you're saying some of these areas aren't conducive to that, they just don't repopulate on their own?
So the way harvesting has occurred in the past, just for revenue. Biggest. What's supposed to happen is the other way. So because of that, it leaves a degraded site. A lot of these trees, they don't have that competition. Grass,
Yeah, on the brush.
right.
I'm always fighting brush. Could you sometime give us a cost analysis of what it would cost to plant 1,000 white spruce on a site, the labor involved and whatever? Do you have those numbers now, or you got an idea, or? I know it's quite labor intensive, I've done it.
For 105 acres, it was 32.
About 32,000.
Okay, and before you could cut those 30 years?
It has been actually in that state for about 30 years. So after treatment.
I'd be all for it, so if you come up with a plan, I've got one vote right here. So,
Plan.
yeah, okay.
Mr. Smithers.
Mr. Forsythe, sort of ask part of the question that I was going to ask in regard to cutting that's been done. What manner of cutting was it? Was it clear cutting or was it selective? Was it minimum diameter of trees or what's been the practice in the past? You mentioned regeneration. It's been taking place. I couldn't hear half of your answer that you said.
So in the past, it's mostly been thinnings. Again, that whole revenue need is been migrated, so it's going in and taking out. And what I'm finding from the information I've gathered so far from inventories, it's way below property stocking. So way below any kind of actual volume.
Mr. Burke.
Kevin and I have listening to forestry for every soil and water. And I think it's important to know that the Emerald Ash Borer has been very time consuming. Hot stand. It's now working with Stockholm, it's working with Canton, working on the hiking trails. The services are very much in demand. So, and I think that those are all great questions of how do we restore the. But I wouldn't want to be anybody to think that it's not.
Unfortunately, I think the county forest, I think Aaron, it only consumes about 1% of our forest, the county forest. The Emerald Ash Borer, 0.1%. So we have 4,200 acres of land. So the land's not barren, it's through natural regeneration, it's just not timber that's growing that's harvestable. Mr. Forster.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, and we have a lot of resources, youth bureau, kids, whatever, that can volunteer to do that. And if you've never planted a tree, you should, you know, it's just, it's fun, really. So I think a little bit of work, it wouldn't take a lot to get it together and just order a bunch of trees and done.
I think, Aaron, the true cost is actually preparing that site for it. I mean, that's what's the cost per acre for that.
Between 200 and 500.
So you're essentially taking what's there, what's the brush that's grown up, and you're eliminating that. It's almost like, won't say it's like planting corn, but
No.
simply you've got a void surface. So it's fairly dramatic. Brianne, you don't have the money, right? The carbon credits, I don't know how big your carbon credits are to the foundations.
Yeah, it's small because we need to build up these trees, but carbon credits that were, we've got an estimate of how many credits we have, and it's a very small number, and it speaks to the condition of the parcels.
I think Mr. Burke has another question.
Well, just a comment, I wasn't trying to say that we have a lot of emerald ash. There's a lot along. There's a lot of.
Aaron could probably tell us how many trees you're expecting to mark with an estimate.
Actually, no.
Thousands.
Thousands, but not an exact.
That concludes your report. Do we have any additional questions? Mr. Burke, that's a comment or question.
Not related to Aaron's work, but the, if you could talk about the work doing the that was part of the state.
Sure.
I'm sorry. Well, what was reported that 1.65 billion was paid out. And that was from Penn Street.
Okay, yep. So with the USDA NRCS Natural Resource Conservation Service, we have a field office here in Canton. They cover Jefferson, St. Lawrence, and Lewis counties. There are a number of programs that they administer every year to our producers, and 1.6 million was what has been paid out this year in those tri-counties. I know St. Lawrence County has 6 new contracts for ag producers in the county to administer programs, projects.
Right, let's move on to the county administrator's report. We do have a resolution that may concern soil and water. So we'll move on to that, and that resolution is modifying the 2022 budget for the county administrator's office to complete additional work of hazard tree removal associated with the ash tree removal project. Moved by Ms. Curran, second by Mr. Smithers.
So this resolution came out of many conversations about how we get after a phased approach to Emerald Ash Borer impact in St. Lawrence County. And part of the discussion certainly happened amongst legislators, but also took place amongst the Soil and Water Conservation District. And in looking at the route along the highway bounds or the right of ways, it became apparent that consideration should be given to other hazard trees. While they're out there, while the work is being completed, they should go ahead and take the hazard trees as well. So that was presented, I think, also at the beginning, that impeded the 900,000 as it would be diluted by taking the hazard trees as well.
Sure. So as we're out there, Eric is out there marking the ash trees. The question was brought up, wouldn't it be more cost effective to remove those hazard trees? When we initially did our inventory of the county right of ways back in 2019, we also identified hazard trees that have a potential of falling into the road. So if we are having cutting crews out there removing the other trees, would be most cost effective to also remove those trees at the same time. And so this resolution speaks to adding funds to the contract, match with the ARPA, and remove those additional trees.
So the goal was to utilize the ARPA funds as both was represented to the board and adopted by resolution. However, those funds would reduce the amount of the Emerald Ash Borer trees inevitably because it also be covered in hazard trees. So we said in that way, two things. One, we need to move to a place where annually, because this is only a portion, a small portion of the county, where we watch the Emerald Ash Borer move, and they're able to, on an annual basis, long after ARPA funds are spent, continue with county appropriations to take down those trees and ensure that county right-of-ways are kept free of hazards. So these funds will be taken in this year from contingency, but we really want to change the mindset, not only to the reforestation piece, but also to have an appropriation on an annual basis that will help continue to address the Emerald Ash Borer as it moves further into the county, and be able to take a look at the reforestation, both either through credits or some other approach, because we know we won't be cutting for at least, I think, initially another 17 years. Questions?
Mr. Forsyth.
Isn't there a new beetle on the way?
There always is.
Right? The Asian, is it the Asian or the,
Spotted line.
yeah, it's in Pennsylvania now? Oh, you'll be here.
Mr. Janisha.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say that this is a long time coming, because County Environmental Council and Aaron was, like Aaron was working with the park. And John Penbush was leading charge of all. And we had folks from Niagara Mohawk, which surveys done, that was taken. We looked at what Onondaga County was doing, and I think a lot of it, I realize it wasn't any money, but I think a lot of the efforts were undertaken by the efforts. So, thank you.
So we are remiss, the ARPA committee, we didn't anticipate the cost. We should put more money into this, because I think we could actually get the job done at one of our soil and water committee meetings. We're talking about $1.5 million, but we're not to do the full job. So they come in, this 200,000 is coming out of our contingency account rather than the ARPA funds. Encourage everyone to actually support it rather than having our highway crews who are not tree professionals out there take these down. And then I think what happens is many times we're dealing with them after they fall down. So this is a great opportunity, the wise investment is 200,000. So all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried.
And more to come on the carbon credits, carbon referral credits, as you learn more about it and learn how counties and municipalities are managing, trying to make this a reality for preserving forests. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Aaron.
appreciate it. Yep. So our next resolution is modifying the 2022 budget for the county administrator's office for advertising expenses. Moved by Ms. Curran, second by Mr. Reagan.
So as you may recall, and the resolution reads, we have expanded where we're landing our advertisements across the county. We want to monitor this as the year goes on and not over anticipate, but we believe these funds will be used to the remainder of the year, looking at both the bids we have coming up and all the requirements that come along with the elections and everything.
Okay, any questions? Which could be called Reagan Save the Newspaper thing. I think it's what we call it. We had the sober amendment in their negotiations. But Jim, let's make a comment about supporting the newspaper.
I think the real goal was to reach more of the county citizens, to make them informed about what their county government is doing, and help make them aware of bidding opportunities and job opportunities and a host of other opportunities, which is an obligation of county government. And this reform was long overdue.
Save the paper. Okay, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Big guy.
That was well timed.
Okay, so that passes, all right. So the next one is setting a date for a public hearing on proposed local law C for the year 2022. Authorizing the use of video or similar service for remote attendance in meetings of public bodies acting in the name of St. Lawrence County pursuant to chapter 1 of the laws of 2022 for the state of New York. We'd like to move that. It's current. Is there a second? It's by Mr. Forsythe and Mr. Spinners.
So you may recall, in May, we had a conversation about moving toward the end of a state of emergency declaration by the governor. And in that way, what was provided earlier in the year was the ability of local governments to pass a local law that would allow this to continue at their discretion. And so the county attorney was tasked at the time to draft a local law. And it's requested that this be brought forward for a floor discussion to determine not only for this body, but also for advisory boards, committees, and councils to be able to proceed should the state of emergency expire in the coming weeks and months. If you see located at the bottom of the resolution before you get into the language of the law, if this were successful, dependent upon, I believe it's the 14th, that this current, or the 12th, Kelly keeps me on track, that the current state of emergency will expire. That is also the day of our September board meeting. But this would go into effect Monday, October 3rd, and it would move forward from there upon filing with Secretary of State. So this provides a language for that remote appearance to take place.
Questions or comments? All those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Okay. Next resolution is authorizing the creation of a sheriff's marked vehicle reserve for the purpose of ensuring that St. Lawrence County patrol vehicles are replaced in a schedule that ensures public and officer safety. Moved by Burke, and second by Mr. Nisa and Mr. Curran.
So you'll recall when I made the annual recommendations for reserves, I spoke to these not as an action item, but as a recommendation. And so that also was accompanied by the blighted property, which you approved last month, to be able to address separate from commercial properties, residential properties related to the tax rolls and returning and cleaning properties in the county. This resolution is more an internal reserve. In years past, there have been areas that were go-tos, if you will, in difficult budget times. Highway budgets, sheriff's patrol cars, and we would reduce contingency. So you could argue about the merit of having to make those determinations and putting officers in vehicles that were long overdue for replacement. We've been able to, and the delays associated with COVID on the vehicle market been able to continue moving forward with replacement vehicles. Many of you, and the sheriff's mentioned it, have noticed the vehicles are transitioning from the black vehicles we've had for a number of years over to the white vehicles with the tan trim on them. So as we continue to receive vehicles we long ordered, probably in excess of 2 to 3 years ago, we're starting to see some newer vehicles on the road for the sheriff's department. So this wouldn't be the annual appropriation. I think we've come, since I've been administrator, to a pretty even two that they replace on an annual basis. However, knowing future boards may have to make very difficult decisions about what they're putting onto the tax levy, and it may not include those 2 vehicles. So years past, there's been lots of conversations that started at 5 or 8 vehicles, all the way down to none. And so this puts in place a reserve that would be funded out of this year's results. So you'll hear me talk about it again next summer, to restore, again, the financial stability of the county, but also to set this aside for that purpose. As you may recall in the discussions about the auction proceeds, when vehicles are sold that the county owns, they go into one account, and the sheriff for many years has had an auction proceeds account specific to sheriff's vehicles. We would provide those proceeds into this reserve as well. I think that also, while it won't be much, it helps to appreciate each year on top of any of the results we're able to contribute from the performance of the prior year. Questions?
So I believe we have 10 patrol cars, 10 or 12.
11.
We have 11. So Madrid Washington, as an example, we have 10 buses, they replace 2 every year. Just keep rolls, go down to the bonding thing in the budget. That way they don't get stuck with the one that's got 200,000 miles on it. Just keep rolling. It's a good plan. You can adjust to it. So we'll have to, any further questions on this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion created too.
Just a couple other items.
Yes.
Just to give you an update with regard to the COVID tests that we still have in stock. Paxton Hepburn requested 8 cases that are going tomorrow. That leaves the county with 52 cases remaining. We haven't received enough additional tests in some time, but we still have 52 cases available. We keep them available out here and by singles. You can take them on your way out or let folks know if they want to pick up free tests. They're available here. In September, wanted to let you know we'll be bringing you a resolution both to clean out some of the funds that we've been using internally for upgrades, updates to facilities, but also we have some slightly larger projects coming forward. We've bid out and are looking to do some facade updates on what we call the new courthouse, new meaning 1993. On the facade on that side, level the sidewalks and do some building upkeep that we've neglected. Also, for a reasonably significant elevator upgrade, we have some obligation to keep those in operation. We'll be doing those as well. We'll bring that to you next month. Also want to remind you, there is no meeting next week to celebrate the Labor Day holiday, the end of summer, but that our board meeting will be the 12th. We have the combined meetings on the 19th, operations and services. That is also the NISAC conference in Erie County, and then finance will be that following Monday. And I did just want to mention to you that we have been awarded by New York State $172,413. And this is for the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Grant. It does have a reasonably short timeline. The term of the grant is September 1 this year through August 31st of 2024. And the application, imagine the irony, is due the 16th of September. So we have been awarded the amount. Unless there's an objection, we'll move forward with that application. And then as we do with grants, bring you the contract and the resolution comes through for how that's been approved or spent. Any questions?
Mrs. Haggard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Doyle, 52 cases. Do they have good dates on them? I mean, I think we're going to kind of come into another, with school starting again and maybe a resurgence. But I know I had to purge a bunch of tests that I've been forwarding because the dates expired.
We can check some have received extensions for you, so we can get those and compare that to what we have in stock. Get that out to everyone.
Thank you.
Yep. And one other fun fact I wanted to share, legislator Forsyth asked about the fuel for the sheriff's budget with regard to use of this year, 72%. Last year, we were at about 58%, I believe. Oh, 47% last year this time. So we're cost-wise on the money side, not use.
Sure.
As it relates to COVID. There are pharmacies that you can go to a pharmacy. That's not. Sure. Absolutely. Is that well known? Is that? Or you as circulate that?
Okay.
If there is an uptick. It's good.
Absolutely. And I also just wanted to remind everyone that the monthly data, there as we come to the end of August, the first week of September, they'll update the COVID data on the website.
So the Paxlovid, John, is available, but would you not have to have a prescription from a doctor?
My understanding is that there are designated pharmacies that if you test positive in the presence and continue rapid tests, that you can actually. Don't quote me on it. but-
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not aware of that.
But I think that that's the case that.
We'll see if we can get a hold of Jolie Unger. Okay. Okay, anyone else? Move on to committee reports. First up, Cornell Cooperative Extension, Mr. Denisha.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have much to report other than, local foods weekend, September 10th, 12th, and, there are some, pamphlets out on the, entrance to the, for us. For anyone that's interested, kind of see where some from place to the.
Do you know if they've ordered the peeler? We allocated the 50,000 towards the building.
Yes. Yeah, it has been, yeah, we talked about that at the last meeting. And there were a number of us that were reluctant until we actually saw it. And
So it's there.
it's not there, but we were able to, I don't believe it's there. The manufacturer took a video and sent the video and was circulated to all the members of the executive. And, yeah, it's gonna be quite a, it's gonna be a whole lot better than doing it tonight.
Let's take a picture.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Denisha. Fish and Wildlife Management Board for Region 6, Ms. Kernan.
Our next meeting is 2 Thursdays, but a little update, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration did give certain pharmacies pharmacists the ability to just write up this if you come in with a positive test. So we'll have to see where in New York State I can post that.
Thank you. Fisheries Advisory Board, Mr. Pinelli.
Our next meeting is September 27th.
You, Governor Fair Board, Mr. Smithers.
Our next meeting is scheduled for September 6th. I haven't heard much about the fair other than quite a lot of good events. It was an unfortunate cancellation of practical because some essential component was not available. Something so it's unfortunate. A lot of good things. People were glad to be able to be there in person with less COVID restrictions, and the band day was very popular. Of course, the demolition there's an event scheduled for September 25th, Pumpkins Festival. It's been held in the past, and some people are quite pleased with that. I don't have details about that yet.
Mr. Smithers. Also, we'll move on to Highway and Solid Waste.
Yep, Don Chambers gave a pretty thorough report of events that are going on in Bismarck.
Industrial Development Agency, Mr. Rick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Most of you probably recently saw the news report that the, excuse me, that the IDA was awarded for over $400,000 to help with the Dunn River Paper Mill project, which will allow the extension of the rail service also to the Governor Industrial Park. So in addition to helping one of our major paper mills to reduce their operational costs by helping them to use the rail service, having that service more available in the Governor Industrial Park makes it more likely that we'll be able to attract additional businesses to the Governor area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Recreational Trails Advisory Board.
Thank you. We continue the Recreational Trails Advisory Board along with Deb Christie, continue to, and the ATV, UTV clubs that have been involved. We went from 2 last year to 4 this year. Have been working to maintain the trails, with any complaints that we get, certainly from landowners or the DEC. We're on top of them as quickly as we can. Everything seems to be going well, and as everybody knows, this is the second year of us selling trail passes. And just a couple of numbers for you, and this is about a week old, but we had for 2021 1,257 season permits sold and 49 3-day permits sold. And this year we've had 1,592 seasonal permits with 105 3-day permits sold. That was an increase of 335 seasonal permits with 56 3-day permits. And then, there's a lot of discussion about the trail system, and as people continue to ride, people always want more, and and so do we. Some of our trail, obviously, as you all know, as we've approved some county roads, and the towns have certainly been so cooperative in approving local laws for some town roads. This is just some of that information as it comes out. The east section of the trail presently, we have 53 road miles in comparison with 39.2 trail miles. We're working on some private land, maybe some acquisition or approvals in the Buckton Forest area that would take 12 of those miles off the blacktop and put those on trail where we all prefer. And then on the west section, there's road miles 11.6 with trail miles over 27. For the trail, the multi-use trail itself, we have 65 miles of road, 66 miles of trail, combining for over 130 miles of riding. And just to put it in perspective, and obviously Lewis County and the Tug Hill region has been at this for a long time. And, sometimes people will say, well, Tug Hill, it's all trails, but it's not. The road miles in their Lewis County trail system are 450 miles, with the trail being 87 miles for a total of 537 miles. They do have more mileage, but a lot of it is, as you just heard, are on the road. So I just wanted the general public to know that the Trails Advisory Board, along with the Legislative Trails Committee and our team, we continue to work to find more trails in the woods, and certainly looking forward to connecting one side of our county all the way across so that we can connect Lewis County to Franklin County, and we're working diligently to make that happen. Thank you.
Mr. Arquette.
Question.
Mr. Smithers has a question.
Tony, have you heard any progress about changing the weight limit for registration from the current 1,000 pounds? Any movement at all on that?
Thank you, Mr. Smith. That's a great question. Deb Christie just attended a meeting in Lewis County that they called together to try to get a collaboration of counties, to work towards the Assembly and Senate, again, to take another look at that bill. So that happened less than 2 weeks ago, the meeting in Tug Hill. So there are ongoing efforts to legalize it. And luckily for us and Tug Hill and Lewis County, you know, that in the meantime, our trail passes do get us out there with the UTVs, but it is being worked on. Thank you.
That answers your question. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Arquette. St. Lawrence River Valley Redevelopment Agency, Mr. Forsythe.
The CDEIP grant, did the final authorization. The recipients this year, Cranberry Lake Mountaineers, I think that's second year in a row, 20,000 for its purchase of a groomer. Town of Louisville Fire Station repairs 10,000. Morristown Gateway Museum purchase install a gazebo covered space 5,000. Norwood Village Green Concert Series, a handicap ramp, railing and new roof to van shell 20,000. Potsdam Town of pickleball court $10,000 was awarded. And in Wantington, repairs and renovations to the old town hall. We didn't award the full 100,000 this year. We just did it at 70,000. I encourage every municipality to apply each year. There's some good projects that have been done with these monies. We also did a resolution thanking Senator Ritchie for all her efforts for the RVRDA board over the years. Got her a lot of this one wishing. So thank you, Senator Ritchie. So, but
Thank you, Mr. Forsythe. St. Lawrence County Chamber of Commerce. Mrs. Haggard with her abbreviated version. You read the newsletter.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do want to point out that we've had a tournament on the pickleball courts and they're very well used and I checked it out. They're gorgeous. Thank you. The chambers, we met on August 11th, right before the senior picnic. And it's the first time I'd ever seen half these people in person because we've been on Zoom for the last 2 years. So that was pretty exciting. We had a meeting at Best Western. They have had tremendous interest in the ARPA funds that they were allocated for tourism, travel tourism and hospitality program. I want everyone to know that. There are a lot of things coming up. The Old River Fest, and that's going to be really something with the, and I think I mentioned this before, the Now Trinidad boat is coming in. There will be open tours, school tours between September 7th and 11th. And for more information, you can go to www.oldriverfest.com. The Remington Museum and the Ogdensburg History Museum will be offering free admission to those who have a ship boarding pass. So check out the ship and go to these other things. They are upcoming events. I'm trying to mark this down. Okay. The Old River Fest coming up the 6th through the 11th of September. Craft food, wine, open air market, which has been very successful at the St. Lawrence Power and Equipment Museum in good old Madrid on the 24th from 10 to 5. There are only 5 vendor booths still available. So if you want to be a vendor at that, get going. The St. Lawrence County Chamber annual dinner will be held on October 19th at Windy Point in Potsdam. And craft food and wine holiday show at SUNY Potsdam Maxi Hall, December 3rd from 10 to 5. And it says legislators and county leadership are encouraged to attend. Visit www.slcchamber to register or learn more. How's that, Mr.?
That's excellent.
Thank you.
Okay, soil and water. You have Rhiannon here, John. You can just.
Well, I asked for a few extra questions, Kevin, that sheet on this. The only thing that Rhiannon and Aaron didn't cover is crop specialist stuff. And she's been doing wetland easement monitoring. And the AEM planning is continuing. All contracts are signed, including covered crops. And that's it.
Thank you, sir. Yeah.
Thank you.
reading out the, this one. So old and new business, we'll start out with old. Anyone have any old business that they can discuss? Mr. Smithers?
Question that I talked before regarding the requirements for town courts to provide and maintain in each individual town. Could you give us what the requirements are on that? And if each of our individual small towns are required to maintain their own, I'd like to suggest drafting a resolution to present to our state officials that they allow towns to share these facilities instead of each having to provide their own, because it is an expense and they use them very little. Some of these.
Yes, the townships are each town and quite frankly, corporations are required to maintain their own separate court structure. However, they are capable of merging together to maintain a setup that is essentially consolidated court structure. In fact, several years ago, we took a look at something that would have included Urban and Russell and Powell that would have provided for that type of structure. I think it included one other township that ultimately pulled out at the last minute, but the conclusion that I recall that they came to each individual was that the operation as it was right now was probably less expensive than the benefits that they would have provided in consolidated structure. They were looking at creating a centralized court system operating in that area. I think I'm pretty surprised by that line. Those findings have that study and the write-up associated with it, the types of law associated with as well as review the possibility of structure by consolidated human resource perspective. I'd be more than happy to share that with you.
Irene Hargrave has asked me about it a couple of times about the town court over in Oyster.
Like I said, I believe that if I shared that study with you, it would answer a lot of the general questions, even though that study here was very specific. Was put those forward and when three communities actually consolidated.
Take a look at that.
Steve, if you would, could you send that to everyone?
Perfect.
Any new business? Mr. Smithers, again?
I have a concern that was expressed to me from regarding the Governor Community Centers, now the Eldon Conference Center, and the Office of the Aging. Might have talked to Dave Spowman, and he was trying to discuss with Andrea about he felt it was required that they call Canton to schedule sit down lunch ahead of time. And I talked with Andrea about that, and she said, well, she has to meet state requirements and there's staffing shortages, but nobody that's ever showed up has ever been denied a meeting. And she thought that it could become possible to not have to call Canton, but to call the Center of Governor. Do you have any more information about that? It doesn't
No,
seem
other
like
than,
something that's-
I guess, yeah, I didn't expect it. But I thank you. I did talk with Dave Spowman, and he had some concerns about it, and I told him that I would speak to Andrea.
I talked with her and it seemed like it didn't seem like it was something that was unworkable.
Mr. Manley, did you have your hand up earlier?
I just wanted to, whoa, my big voice really doesn't need a mic. I just want to give a little shout out and a thank you to some of our county staff. Last Monday, we had a Ready for School event in Messina Central School District that is open to families in the district as well as neighboring districts in the county. And we had representatives from the Youth Bureau, SNAP, Temporary Assistance, Children's Services, and we also were able to advertise the new Affordable Connectivity Program. And they were able to touch base and connect with a lot of families in the community. So I just wanted to thank the staff for being there.
Mr. Manila. Anyone else before we move into executive session? Mr. Forsyth.
Starting to hear complaints about the water level on the San Juan River, very low. Went for a tour yesterday, very extremely low this time of season, crazy.
So the Thursday IJC report says that the Lake St. Lawrence, which is basically what we're talking about, is down 2.6 feet. The lake level is actually about normal. They must be trying to drop it because they're still releasing. I think Harry, Mr. Smith, as you get the report also, you're sending through 8,300 cubic meters per second, which the normal rate is 7,500.
And you can't blame it on drought because the golf course in Morristown is the greenest I've ever seen. Ever. So,
I think there was such a public backlash over all the properties that flooded on Lake Ontario back in 16 and 17 that they're making sure that it doesn't happen again. The harbor in Montreal, which is really kind of the driver, is at I think 20 feet, which is normal. So in the Ottawa River flow, it's essentially it's down a little bit. I think Montreal Harbor drives everything.
it'll be interesting to see some of these boats get up. Sure.
Yeah. That comes every Thursday. You can, I think you had sent it out into Ruth, everybody. It's pretty interesting. It comes every Thursday. It's a quick read. It's in French, it's in English. We read the English version. So, okay, so a motion to, we have a need for executive session in what categories?
We do for negotiations, litigation, personnel, for the medical, financial credit, or employment history of a particular person or corporation, or matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person or corporation, and one appointment.
Motion to go into executive session made by Mr. Sheridan, seconded by Mrs. Langwood and Mr. Fay. All those in favor of doing so?
Aye.
Aye. And it's an irregular session. Okay, we are back in regular session. Anything else to come before the board? We'll have to wait until September 12th, which is the next meeting. We are adjourned. That motion was made by Mr. Sheridan, seconded by Mr. Lightfoot. All those in favor?